Good morning, everybody. My name is Oluwatosin, and I'll be walking you through how you can actually build your first app with Bubble and how Bubble works. First of all, how many of us have heard of no code or have actually tried using no code before? And how many of us have had like ideas in our heads where we would actually think of something but would have issues building it because we are scared of actually learning how to code? Wow. Sorry. Oh, okay. Okay, first. Well, that's where Bubble actually comes in. So Bubble is basically a no-code tool that allows you to actually build full-scale web and mobile applications without actually having to write traditional code. That's what it does basically. And Bubble was actually created in 2012 by two people, Emmanuel and John Haas. And what they had in mind was to actually build a tool to actually make it easy for developers and designers alike to actually be able to build products fast and easy. And one thing that Bubble actually allows you to be able to do is it supports responsive design, workflows, databases, plugins, and API integration. Think about it as WordPress, but on steroids, even way better than WordPress. I know a lot of you might be. I see. I'm seeing this man's face like it's like. Uh, have you used WordPress before? You use it. Like how often do you use it, and how often does it work with what you are building? Oh, okay, okay. So a lot of us might have heard of multiple no-code tools, things like Framer, things like Workflow, and currently Figma also has like its own part. But mostly, I use Bubble. So why does Bubble matter? Bubble matters because it makes shipping products easier and faster. Imagine having to build a product, something that would actually take you months. Bubble would actually break it down to actually weeks, if not days for you. And it actually eliminates the handoff, the issues between that always happens between designers and developers, where you would actually have, oh, okay, what you actually designed is not buildable, what you built is not what I actually designed, those entire errors that actually happens. And it also makes it easy for people who have zero idea of how to build stuff. Once they can actually watch a few tutorials on Bubble, play around, they would actually be able to come up with something quick and fast. And you can basically use it to build startups, internal products like in-house products, SaaS dashboards, SaaS services. You can also use it to build marketplaces, full-fledged, full-scale e-commerce websites. And what I also used it to build, you can use it to build AI tools. It doesn't necessarily have to be something large, but at least an MVP, something that actually works. So how does Bubble work basically?
I'll use this mic and let's try to do this project properly.
I'm actually a shy person. That's project. So how does Bubble work? Basically, it has three different layers, which is the UI builder, which is the normal canvas where you can actually build your ideas. You have the workflow where you can actually set up actions that would actually occur in your app. And other workflows, we have like the normal traditional workflows where when you click an icon, when you click on a button, it should do something. And then we also have backend workflows too. And last but not the least, we have databases. And what does database do? Databases help us to actually store and manage user data in our product. And it has plugins. And what does plugins allow you to do? Plugins allow you to add a lot more functionality to your app. You can integrate a lot of things using plugins. So instead of actually having to write traditional code, Bubble plugins allow you to actually do a lot. Same thing with API integration and API connector. So next slide, please. So this is the landing page, which was actually built in Bubble. I do not know. Is it possible that I actually project on my system? Okay. So it was actually entirely built with Bubble, and if you're actually looking at it, this is quite, I don't know, straightforward and simple. Do a breakdown of this. This was actually built entirely with Bubble using the visual elements. And some of the visual elements are your normal traditional text, buttons, and groups. We have under groups, we have things like the floating group, the repeating group, and the normal traditional groups, which can actually be split into two, which is rows and columns. For the navigation bar, which is at the top center of the screen, it's basically a floating group. If I were to actually display the live version of the website, you'll be surprised that this navbar stays where it's supposed to be and it doesn't actually move at any point whatsoever. And the entire arrow section, which is the background, is actually an image that was actually AI generated, of course. And the text, everything that you're actually saying, the building block about Bubble is just groups. You being able to actually understanding the structure of layout, like putting everything on top of each other, like the first group, the second group, third group, down to how or what your website is going to be. So I would actually be doing like a live projection of the product on my own system. As you can see, we have something called index, and the index page is basically the first page you would actually see when you actually open a website. So by default, Bubble already gives you the index page, the forgot password page, and the error 404 page by default. So even when your website is not actually fully up, there are actually already 3 ready-made pages. That does not mean the forgot password is already ready-made, the error 404 is ready-made, but the index is basically your landing page where you actually have to build your first screen on. So as you can see on the right, on the left side, a lot of the groups actually have names and all of them have what they are actually doing. And right beside the builder, we would see something called the responsive tab. So what the responsive tab allows you to actually do is work on the responsiveness of your web app. It allows you to be able to work on the responsiveness of your web app. So if I decide to actually click on responsive, the entire canvas should change now, and we should see something called default 992.768. So basically, those are all the screen sizes that we know and we have. So for each screen, we would actually see that by default, it will actually scale it down to fit the individual screens. So this is what it is definitely going to look like on mobile. That's 375, and on 320, this is what it will also look like. So if I decide to come over to this side, we can actually see everything that is in the entire arrow section. Basically, everything is in a group, and what the group is doing is it is holding every piece of information that you would see on your landing page. The buttons, the text, even the text animation. That is why one element is not actually showing, because by default it's not supposed to show on page load, but it is supposed to animate into our web app. So if we come down here, these are a list of things that Bubble allows us to be able to use by default inside the app. We have our text element, we have the button, we have icons. We also have image, shape, alerts, video, line charts, and so on and so forth. So for every element, they have what they are allowed to do. For example, the video element, you can actually upload a video directly into the Bubble app. So you would either use either Vimeo or YouTube. And after that, we also have containers. And what are containers? These are like wrappers that help us to hold our elements in place. And we have multiple types of containers. We have the group, which is the ones we're actually seeing by default. We have the repeating group, and later on in this presentation, I will actually be showing you what a repeating group does and how it actually works. we have the pop-up, and which I know a lot of us are actually familiar with. Pop-up, which is when you click on a button, an animation would actually come on your screen with information asking you or telling you to actually carry out a certain action. And we also have the floating group, which is actually what, for most of the times, actually acts as our navigation bar in Bubble. So moving to this, we would see something called workflow. And what does workflow allow us to do? Workflow basically allows us to actually tie every action in our web app together. Like, okay, when you click on this, it should take you to this. As you can see, there are a lot of like workflows already inside, just on the landing page alone. Like just on the landing page, like, oh, okay, when you click on this button, it should it should take you to it should take you to a specific action. So this is like a simple workflow that is on the app. So you can see that when a button, like the button sign in or start dreaming is actually clicked, it should actually take you to the login page. Easy peasy. It should just take you to the login page. And we can also see that there are multiple workflows still on this same page. So if I should come up to like the design interface or the design canvas, I can scroll down and actually show you everything on it's lagging. Everything on the website. So basically it's just something quick. It's not supposed to be like, sorry, any question? Yes, okay. Uh, Basically, the thing is, look, it. I would love to do that, but because of time constraints, that is why. Because if I should actually decide to actually, okay, build everything from scratch, 2 hours, we are not out of here yet. So I'm just like actually showing pointers and how everything works and trying to explain it. So please, if anybody does not understand, I would actually like you to actually ask questions. So with that said, please, any question so far? Okay, first. So how about can we do like a quick login form? Will that work? Okay. So we'll actually be creating a new web page and we would call it login. Just shoot. So yeah, we've created a new page. This is a completely blank canvas. And if I should actually decide to actually preview it for you guys to actually see, okay. The page you actually created is completely empty. And from the URL, we can see something called debug mode equals to true. So what that actually means is, in case we're actually encountering any errors, we would actually be able to like find the bugs here. So there are three ways of like running your website. We can have the normal, slow, and step by step. Normal way is just for you to actually run your website, like open it normally. Slow, it should take time to actually load for each action. While step by step on the lastly, actually does each action one after the other, and it actually shows you how it is doing each action one after the other. So you would actually be able to like detect where your error is. So we would come back to our landing, our app. Sorry. So we are back to our canvas, and as you can see, it's actually a blank one. So we would come to the page itself, and we would change the layout from fixed to column. And basically, there are four types of layouts, which is column, row, aligned to parent, and fixed. Column is basically it will give you a default landing page or a default screen, but everything will be stacked on each other. While row, on the other hand, everything will be side by side. Every element to actually add to the page would be side by side. While aligned to parent is only used when you actually have like a group and you want to add an image to the group, but you want the image to stay in a specific part of the group. So the first thing we're actually going to do is we're going to add a group to this screen. We are going to add a group to the screen. Let's And as you can see, we can actually see that the group has been added. One thing is we should actually know about bubble is we should always name our groups. We should always name the groups. So I'll be actually be calling this group overall or main, because this is actually the group that will be holding everything that we would have. Then I'll come to the layout. I would I'll uncheck this fit height to content for it to be able to like stretch to fill the entire page. So I'll now come back again, add another group to it. I'll put a new group inside. Let's call the group login, because this is where we're actually going to be putting our form. So whenever we are designing a login form, what are the actual necessary elements? Text, an input field, and a button. So obviously we know the text that will actually be on the page is login. So we would actually add a text element to the page, to this group rather, and we would edit it, call it login. So we can actually decide to like style the text anyhow we actually want it. So we can actually increase the font size to 24. Give it a font width, and if we decide to come back here we can actually see that the browser is actually notifying us that there is an updated version of this page. So if we actually refresh, we would actually see what we've actually built so far, which is just text basically. Then we'll come back to our UI builder. What's the next thing in line? Our input field. We would add our input field to this page. So when we're actually logging in, there are actually multiple types of input field. We can actually add our email, and some it could actually be usernames to actually log in. So for the placeholder, we'll just put enter your email. and we can decide to uncheck the fixed width. So basically the entire width of the input field would actually span to fit the entire page. Then we'd add another, then we'd come back to the appearance, and the content format would actually be email. And why is that? Why are we changing the content format? If we leave it as text, Bubble won't recognize it. Even if we enter an email, Bubble will not actually recognize it as an actual email. It will just recognize it as a traditional input text. But if we actually put, like we actually set the content format to email, if we should actually add a wrong email or an invalid style of email, Bubble would actually not accept it. So we would add another input field again for password. And we would actually change the content format to password, the layout, width. So as you can see, we already have two of our elements, which is basically our two input fields, the enter your email, enter password, and what we would actually be needing after is a button that would actually help us to complete our action on this page. So we'll come to the visual elements, add a button. So we can actually look at, okay, fine, we've designed a simple login form, but let's be very realistic with ourselves. There's no style. It looks there. So what would actually do, what I would actually be doing is I would go to the group itself, which is the group that is actually holding everything inside. And I can come to the layout tab and be like a fixed width. Oh wow. Sorry. So I can come and give it a fixed width here. I'll be using percentage. So let's give it 60%. And you can actually see that, okay, fine, it has actually adjusted itself to that group. So the next thing we would actually be looking at is padding. We would actually add padding to it. So the top padding, let's use 32. Bottom, same thing.
10 more minutes, Chief.
Okay. For the left padding, we'll use 20, and for the right padding, we would actually use 20. So we'll come back to the appearance of this group again, and we can decide to give it a background if we want to. So there are multiple things that actually add to the background, either flat color, a gradient, or an image. So which one should we actually add? Sorry? Some people are saying gradient, some people are saying image. I'll go with image. Which I would add two different colors. This, a primary color, 20, and the ending color, nothing fancy, just something that works. So we can actually decide to give it a border radius of, which is going to be a solid color, and we'll give it a roundness of 12. So we'll scroll down, we'll actually change the color of the border to something that works. So if we actually come to the browser to actually check and we actually refresh, we should have our login form. Although it's not fine. So we'll come back, we'll style it once again. We are still on that same group. Then we'll come to the layout and we would actually apply gap spacing between the elements so they don't actually appear clunky and join together. So we'll give it a gap spacing of 8, and voila, there's actually a bit of spacing between. And the fact that we actually have a background for the entire group is actually affecting our input field. So we would actually go ahead and change the colors to something darker. Nah. Change the color of the placeholder text for it to actually be visible well enough for our users to actually see. And then we'll come to the main group, which was the original screen we actually originally designed. And we would also style that because obviously we cannot have our login form just sitting in one corner of the entire page. So we can actually, we'll come to the layout tab and would bring this. And would also, we would actually apply padding to this entire page, which basically is for you to be able to like put the group in the center or to actually give it space from the left and right side of the entire page. Then we'll come to this, sorry, yes, it should be in the middle. So the main. So we can actually see that, okay, fine, we already have our login page or our login interface readily built, even though it's not looking as fine as I want it to be. And if we actually decide to enter an email, yes, it should work. Enter password, it will work still. But now we have our sign in button, and if I actually click on it, it won't actually do anything. It won't do any action whatsoever. So what I would actually have to do is I would come back, click on the sign in button, and come back to appearance. Then I would add a workflow. So basically what the workflow is supposed to do is, the moment I actually click on sign in, if it were to be that there was an actual app in place that already has the data, if the moment you click on sign in, Bubble would actually check for the email and the password hash actually, not because Bubble doesn't actually store passwords. So it will check for the password hash and then it will log the user in. So I'll create a mock database since we do not actually have a database yet. And I'll create a new type and I'll call it test. So we can actually see that by default, it has actually given us the fields that should be under the test, but then we do not have the field for the email when it is entered. So we would actually come down here to create a new field. We would call the field name email. And the field type is going to be text, and then we would create that. So when we now come back to our workflow, so we'll tell it when the sign in button is clicked, we will tell it to create a new thing. So creating a new thing basically means you are actually adding a new item to the database. So when we say create a new thing, it will ask for which type we would actually want to add it to. So we would come here, add it to our tests. So we'll set the field, which is the email, the value for the email, which is impute the value. So what that is actually telling Bubble to do is when you actually click on sign in, it should take the value of what is in the email field and store it in the database. So we'll come back to the browser and we'll wait for it to refresh for quite some time. And then I'll add my own email. Let's put a password. And the moment we click on sign in, obviously it's not actually going to look like it did something because by default, when we click on sign in, it's supposed to actually take us to a new page. So I would come back. If we actually check the database and we come and we check under app data, we'd actually see that it has actually added my email. It's showing the time that it was actually created and everything that I just added. So that's just how it works. Simple and easy. So if I were to actually add a new page to this login form, the moment I click on sign in, it will actually direct us to that new page. Or let me see, I can, okay. Let's go back to the workflow. I can actually, when it creates a new thing, then I will now tell you to go to page. Which is the L44 screen. So I should add my email once again. So basically, the moment I actually had my email and I click on the sign in, once it actually checks and it validates that, okay, this is an actual valid email address, it adds it to the database and then it redirects us to the next page. So if it were to be a web application, what it would actually do it, I can actually do a demo of a web app that was actually built with Bubble, which is this. Let's come to so this was actually built completely on Bubble. Everything that I actually saying was built with Bubble. So if I actually enter my password, please. Okay. Sorry. And most likely forgot my password. So I would actually just run it from the database directly here, run as. So I'll go straight to the dashboard and click on run as. So the moment I actually log in, the fact that I do not actually know what the password is and Bubble doesn't actually store the password. it's not like it doesn't store the password, but it doesn't store our password the way you would actually write it. So normally on a normal day, most of the time, if we were to be like with traditional developers, they'll just go to the database. That's if the password is not encrypted, copy the password and be able to log in back. But Bubble on the other hand doesn't store passwords. Which means once you've forgotten your password, there's no way that you'd actually go to the database to be able to retrieve your password. But Bubble actually does recognize your passwords with hashing. So basically, it's going to, the moment you actually sign up, it's going to hash your password, still store it, but you would have access to it. The developer won't have access to it. You will never be able to have access to it. But the moment you actually try to log in again, Bubble will actually run your password through that same hash and say that, oh, okay, fine. This password is actually correct. Log this user in. And if it notices that it is an incorrect password, it will log them in. So everything they're actually seeing on this screen is basically an entirely built to Bubble. You can, and it's actually showing the current user who is actually logged in, the person's name with an avatar, and you can actually decide to upgrade the plan.